So the final presentation before our last Q&A session is from Todd Bentley, and he is the Chief Risk Officer at the VBA, and he is going to talk to you about the risk-based approach that has been mentioned by a number of speakers over the conference. Thank you, Todd.
Thank you so much. I hope everybody can hear me, and if not, I'm sure somebody will somehow tell me. So I am going to talk about risk-based regulation today. And I want to kick off by saying that everybody has heard about risk-based regulation, and we all know that, yes, it focuses on areas of risk or harm. And I'm not going to bore you with going through that again, but when you start talking to people, whether it be industry, even within the VBA itself, what that actually means and how it is implemented starts to vary. So we all have a shared definition, but we all sort of put it into practice in a different way. So what I wanted to talk to you about today is really to provide you with a clear description of how the VBA interprets this and how we apply risk-based regulation to our activities. So just as a very quick intro, what is risk-based regulation? It's probably easiest to start with what is not. When you apply a random sampling or you just allocate your resources across an industry profile evenly across certain activities or a certain nature of activities, that's not a risk-based. Even if some of those activities take more time, that's not using risk or a priority basis. So time is not an indicator of risk or priority. But where risk-based regulation does come in, and I love diagrams, and I love showing things visually, is something like this. In this diagram, we see 4 key areas of risk, and you can see that we're focusing effort on those 4 areas. So we identify those areas of harms, and you focus resources and efforts into those areas. It does mean that we don't look at everything in the industry. It does mean that there's going to be some blind spots, perhaps. But with that said, we are still doing a bit of sampling across the industry to check and balance and make sure that there's things and monitor for emerging risks or issues, and also just to check that everything's still, if you will, under control in those areas. I also wanted to emphasize that being risk-based regulation does not simply focus on inspection or audit activities. This is about the broader scheme of risk-based activities, and that includes our education program, our research program, our engagement activities. Everything we do will be oriented or should be oriented around these areas of risk and priority. Now, no discussion on risk-based regulation can be complete without a reference to Black or Sparrow, so I've put in the obligatory slide on their definitions, but I'm not going to read through them. But what I do want to draw your attention to is risk-based regulation is about using the finite resources available to create the greatest impact. So drawing on what I said, we identify those priority risks, and we will use our tools, the regulation, engagement, education, research, or a mix of those to address those various priorities as best we can with the resources we have available. In terms of the benefits, there's a greater impact. So we actually have good impact on those harms, greater transparency. By sharing and making it clear what our priorities are, everybody will see and be able to realize that VBA is focusing on those. There is consistency, so you'll see our activities are surrounding, and you can see how we're coordinating our activities in a consistent manner around those harms. Greater efficiency, so we're focusing on those areas, basically the biggest bang for the buck. And finally, outcomes. This ties back into our strategy, and we constantly aim to improve those 3 public outcomes that our Chief Commissioner spoke to yesterday. So the safe and resilient buildings, communities reach their potential, in a confident and thriving industry. By addressing these harms in a coordinated way, in a prioritized way, we want to see the maximum outcomes achieved. In terms of the VBA's risk-based regulatory approach, this is what it is in brief. It is, you identify the harms in the top right, then you prioritize those for action, you address those harms, you report, and then you repeat. And I'll walk through each of those stages. So in terms of the identification of harms, we use as much data as we have available. So this is based on our research, it's based on the data we've collected, our investigation activities, our audit and inspection outcomes, everything we have. We also do draw on our staff and expert inputs. And of course, and very importantly, we do listen to industry. We recognize that industry and yourselves have insights and knowledge that we do not. And we want to leverage that to support our activities and again, drive those contributions towards those public outcomes that I noted before. And all of this combines, so we take all those inputs and then we create an industry harms register, which collates what are all these harms that are present in industry. We then look at those harms and we take, using our internal risk management framework and our understanding of risk appetite as to what are we willing to sort of accept for now, or where we might want to really take a focused approach from an appetite perspective, we identify what those top priorities are. And all of that ends up into an annual regulatory plan, which describes the range of harms, the priorities we have, and how we're going to address those, whether it's going to be an engagement, education, or a regulatory sort of audit and inspection style approach, or in most cases, it will be a combination of all those three approaches. So we prioritize, and then we go in and do. So we deliver on the annual regulatory plan. We deliver all of our regulatory activity, inspections, audits, investigations, education, research, all of our communications. So that's how we are addressing those priorities. We do report on that. We also want to note that we do have internally, we do have our own improvement activities. We recognize that we can continue to improve and better enable our resources to address those harms. So we do continually try to make our own systems more efficient and more effective so that we can spend more of our resources focused on addressing those harms. And finally, the outputs, the reporting. We want to be open and honest about those outcomes. So you've seen that we are improving the transparency of our public reporting. We have our annual report, which has obviously been ongoing, but our quarterly reporting, our PIP and PAP reporting, as well as our industry communications, those are all improving over time, and we want to continue growing how transparent we are and making you aware of how we are addressing those harms and how those harms are going. And then we repeat that cycle. I did want to highlight VBA's annual regulatory plan. Sue did mention this earlier in the day, but just as a quick reminder, this annual regulatory plan, and the first one we will publish will be June, July this year. It's going to have that clear statement of priorities. Where are we focused on? And where are we going to focus on our resources? Those resources, again, might be education, engagement, as well as those regulation activities like audits and inspections. We're publishing this to be completely transparent to yourselves, to practitioners, to consumers, and anybody else who may be interested. And we would hope that by being this transparent and this overt in what our priorities are, it creates a discussion around those priorities within industry. And in that discussion, we welcome insights, we welcome challenge to those priorities, and we welcome people identifying, hey, what about this risk? Or why wasn't this a priority? That's a very, very positive conversation to have. And I welcome that conversation to have with yourselves, with other stakeholders, because that's how we will learn and enhance. And every year on year, we will be enhancing our annual regulatory plan and reviewing and monitoring. And so within every year, yes, we do our best we can. So the annual regulatory plan is based on the information we have available at the time. But we learn things, and we will review our plan. We will update. We will reprioritize when and where necessary. And every year we will republish with the latest priorities that we have. What we're hoping to see, and this is just if you will, snapshot over time, we would hope to see that in the first year we have some really big priorities. We would hope that over time we see those key priorities. And if you focus on the big red dot on the left, you can see that over time it actually starts to disappear. But we also recognize that new risks will emerge over time. And yeah, we have to reprioritize. And that's where over time we will say, or every year, or even within years, we say, actually, we've got to refocus our activity from this risk or effort over to this risk in priority. And why those things will emerge? Well, Effie earlier provided a range of reasons why some risks will emerge. New technologies, new approach to building, modular design, all of those things could potentially present a new risk in the near future. And we have to be ready to respond. And again, we will draw on all the information we have available. That's our data, our inspections, but also the inputs that we get from yourselves, other industry stakeholders, consumers. In brief, just to summarize, really a risk-based regulatory approach is all about maximizing outcomes we seek to achieve based on those resources we have available. Our annual regulatory plan will be very transparent, it will be very open, and it will highlight what we see as the risks and priorities based on all that input we have. And I hope and expect that you will be able to see that we have oriented our activities, whether that be our engagement activities, education activities, or regulatory activities around those priorities. And that is it for me. So I know it was a very quick round the world tour of risk-based regulation in the VBA. And yeah, thank you so much for your time.